What if the same chemical that's driving your motivation is also destroying it? And who doesn't have a bad habit or addiction they're trying to break? But what if the secret isn't what you've been told? Willpower, discipline. What if it lies in a chemical balance in your brain? We're diving into all that and more on today's book breakdown, Dopamine Nation. Hey, what's going on, guys? Clark with the book breakdowns, the series where I cram 200 pages into 10 big ideas that'll change your life. I went through all 200 pages. I pulled the best studies and stories and things I think will help you in this video. So that sounds good. Smash the like button. Make sure you're on a newsletter down below. It's free. I send it to you every Saturday, straight to your inbox with ideas that can change your life. Starting with big idea number one. You look at the modern world now. Dr. Anna Lembke calls your smartphone the modern day hypodermic needle, which sounds intense, but is it really? I mean, everything that has dopamine you can get on your phone now with one swipe or click away. We got social media giving us validation, telling us who we are. Oh, they like me. Oh, they don't like me. We got Uber Eats, where you can order whatever food that tastes the best, and alcohol. We got all the entertainment now that's not even what it was even 5 years ago. You know, it's shorter. It's 30 seconds, 45 seconds, brighter, faster, louder. The richest company in history, the social media tech companies, literally employ engineers that work on slot machines. Things like pulling down to refresh, that's intentional. Delaying notifications when you log in so it feels new and like you get a hit from it, that's intentional. Everything's designed to make you addictive. Why is it free? Why are social media sites free? Why is pornography free? Because they're monetizing your attention. There's that saying, if it's free and there's no product, you are the product. I'm getting so fired up because this topic, I think, is the intersection that connects every single dot in our modern world. From habit change to lifestyle design to addiction to motivation, it all intersects in what we're talking about in this video, which is a perfect segue into the next big idea. What the heck is dopamine? Let's lay the foundation here and what it does in your life. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's a chemical in your brain that's involved in motivation, seeking out rewards, movements, as well as a few other things we won't mention here for the sake of time. Now, what we'll focus on here is the two most important ways it helps you with motivation. Dopamine plays a bigger role in you seeking out a reward, anticipation, rather than the pleasure you feel getting it. In fact, dopamine is so powerful in your motivation that if it's always on, you don't have any motivation to do anything else. So there was a study done on rats where they placed an electrode in their brain that fired off the reward pathway. And the rats, when they hit a button, it got fired off. They lost all motivation to eat and drink and eventually died because they didn't need to do anything else. All their needs were met. All the motivation to just do that thing, hit the button, was there. Of course, we're not rats, but your motivation pathways work the same way. That whatever you feel the strongest dopamine urge for, that's what's important and you'll seek it out. Which brings up the second point. The more something secretes dopamine and the faster it sends it to you, the more addictive it becomes. So here's some interesting things that secrete dopamine in your life that most people use. All right, chocolate, 55% increase. Sex, 100%. Caffeine, 120%. Nicotine, 150%. Video games, around 150, 175, depending on the game. Alcohol, 200%. Gambling, 200 to 400%. Of course, in wins, but also near misses when the odds are 50-50. Cocaine, 225%, and then amphetamine, 1000%. So if you're doing something that spikes your dopamine 400%, compare that to working out or building a business. You know, maybe that only spikes it 100%. It's not going to feel as good. And the point is that the more dopamine we're seeking artificially, the less motivation we'll have. We'll essentially just kind of become the rats and not want to do other things. So let's keep building, okay? Now you're thinking, okay, well, how does this actually work in my brain? Dr. Anna Lembke has this brilliant metaphor of a seesaw. And on one side there's pain, the other side there's pleasure. Now this wants to remain balanced in your brain. And dopamine is what's tipping the scale. So if you tip it really high to the pleasure side, with scrolling or anything that is addictive or secretes dopamine faster and quicker, right? Then what happens is you feel really freaking good but then eventually it needs to remain balanced. So gremlins, she calls it, the pain gremlins, hop on the other side of the scale to tip the balance back. And what follows after that big hit of pleasure is a big hit of pain. And this is why you feel in this oscillation of highs and lows. You know, we've all experienced this back in the days when I drank a lot. I'd feel euphoric, and then you get hungover, and then there's this big rush of anxiety Sunday night. It's called the Sunday scaries, right? Where you had like a killer weekend or a vacation you get back from, and you're like, oh my God, I have to go to work. That's in some way all this pain flooding into you with anxiety. Now, one thing to note here, because you're probably like, well, what about natural sources? Natural sources of dopamine don't skew this seesaw nearly as much as artificial ones. And even though they kind of work the same way in your brain, a great comparison would be calories. There's healthy calories and unhealthy calories. Even though they're the same thing on paper, one batch you need less of to feel more energetic. The other batch is easier to overeat, consume, makes you feel not so good, and has problems. Same thing with dopamine, artificial versus the real thing. Even though it works the same way in your brain, it's not the same when you look at it long term. So now let's talk about each extreme of the sides there, the pain side and the pleasure side, and what happens if they're out of balance before we talk about how to bring it back to baseline. Starting with pleasure, there's something sneaky in your brain called neuroadaptation. The more you do a substance, the more of it you need to feel like you once did the first time. In addiction, this is called chasing the dragon. Also known as tolerance. You know, you start drinking and that 2 beer feeling feels amazing. The more you drink, the more you need to feel like you had 2 beers. What's really ironic is that the constant pursuit of pleasure leads to pain.
Can't get pleasure spikes anymore. There's nothing that I buy that brings me happiness. I bought a Ferrari. I wasn't happy for more than 24 hours, put 100 miles on the fucking thing in a year and got rid of it. You know, like I just didn't care. Being a pleasure seeker is like being a drug addict. You take a Percocet, makes you feel good. You know, now 2 weeks later, you got to take 2 Percocets to get the same feeling. 3 weeks later, you're taking 3, 4, 5, and then eventually you're taking them just to not feel like shit and you don't get high anymore. Same thing with pleasure. It's a black hole.
Hedonism leads to pain. And this isn't something that Dan just thought of. Buddhism, thousands of years ago, figured this out. The Buddha was a prince in a walled palace. I mean, the dude had it completely made. Until he goes out of his city walls and sees all the suffering in the world. He sat under the Bodhisattva tree, became enlightened with the Four Noble Truths, that existence is suffering. All this suffering is because we want things, we're attached to things, and that to get rid of these attachments is to find peace, and you follow the Eightfold Path. So the Buddha had pleasure, but was miserable, and renouncing it, leaning more on the hard thing, the painful thing, actually gave him the peace, the equilibrium he was searching for. So ultimate pleasure makes you feel miserable because all the gremlins will jump on the pain side, bring it down, and you're just gonna be stuck in pain as long, probably longer than you were in that little pleasure state for. Big idea number 5. Now look, the last thing in this video I wanna do is come across as preachy or been there, done that. And in fact, I'll share here something raw. At the peak, I was doing the equivalent of 2 packs of cigarettes a day in Juul pods. And I remember the low point was when I was traveling on tour with the band. And I was so addicted, like we had this layover, I had to go into the airport bathroom and like find a stall and, you know, hit my little vape. And right next to me, there's a guy taking a massive dump that just reeked. And I saw myself from like this third party perspective and I'm like, dude, you're better. This is disgusting. So on my way out, I took the vape, I threw it in the trash can, and I vowed to never touch nicotine or vaping again. Which lasted exactly a week because I went out and bought Nicorette gum. And then Zyn pouches. And man, these Zyn pouches felt even better than vapes. They were more convenient. I felt like it hit even stronger and I felt euphoric. Like I would just pop a Zyn, I would be on a sales meeting and boom, you know, I would turn into this like focused, I felt I was more charismatic at networking events. I felt like I could shoot videos better. Like I would just lock in. And I kind of convinced myself that I needed this to be productive. I had also convinced myself that it was healthy. Nicotine's not bad itself, it's the cigarettes that are bad, and nicotine's healthy because it helps you focus and prevents dementia. And even if all that's true, here's what I noticed and why I'm sharing this with you. Andrew Huberman says addiction is the progressive narrowing of the things that bring you pleasure. That's a true line. Anytime you're addicted to anything, the things that will bring you pleasure in life go from this to this to this to this to this to pretty soon all you care about is that one substance. And the craziest part about this is that, Zen used to make me feel really good and like perform better. But then after a couple years of doing it, I realized I just needed it to not feel bad. And that was wild. I'm like, what is even the point? Like every time I do this thing, I get tired. And I'm like, it's like I'm exhausted and then I do this thing and I'm just tired. And then I'm exhausted and now I'm just tired. Like literally I became this zombie and I didn't have any motivation. I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought I was burnt out. I thought I wasn't aligned in my business. So I shut everything down and it was like making over $1 million a year. And I'm just like, oh, I don't want this anymore. Something's not right. I became irritable. At the peak, I started having all these intrusive thoughts, which really freaked me out. Like health anxiety. I made a bunch of doctor's appointments and, I'd freak out if there was a mole. I'm like, what is this? Oh my God, I have cancer. I'm going to die in 2 days. Yeah. Paranoia, like just experienced all these side effects from it. Anything that you get hooked on will narrow what you find pleasure in life, and freeing yourself from the slavery of addiction that takes your essence, bottles it up and sucks the life from you is the best thing you can do for yourself this year. Better than any goal you can set, better than any habit you can build, is breaking the thing that is sucking your life away. Hey, before this next point, if you haven't already, make sure you're on our Refusing to Settle email list. I send a new newsletter to you directly from me every Saturday with ideas and tips that can change your life. It's 100% free. I'll link it down below. Big idea number 6. So this next point is like my favorite from the book. I find is fascinating for you. How addictions and high dopamine behaviors mess up your brain, why you start craving immediate gratification, and how it warps your motivation. Addicts who are hooked on substances, there's one study she mentions in the book where they heard the following sentence: after waking, Bill began to think long about his future. Then they got asked, hey, how long do you think that future he was thinking about is? Like, just throw out a number. And hey, this is fun. Why don't you do this right now too? How long would you say the future he was thinking about is? Days, months, weeks, years, what is it? Well, the healthy non-addict said 4.7 years, and the addict said 9 days. 9 days versus 4.7 years. The point, when you're addicted to something or you have this high dopamine activity that you're hooked on, your temporal horizon starts shrinking. So what you consider a long time is actually shorter and shorter and shorter. The deeper point here is think about any goal you want and the amount of long-term delaying gratification you need to bring it about. Starting a business, getting in the best shape of your life, making a ton of money, having a kick-ass relationship that you're stoked on. All those require a longer time horizon. And if we prioritize immediate now, quick, fast, we shrink because we're so hooked on immediate gratification activities. That's not going to build the life we want. But the next big idea makes that matter even more. We've been talking about how pushing on the pleasure side of that scale makes the pain come back. But you might have asked, okay, what about pushing on the pain side of the scale? Does that make the pleasure rise? If you ask that, you're onto something. This is the branch she talks about in the book called hormesis, the study of intentional pain to get pleasure. You've likely experienced some version of this in your life, whether that's a runner's high you get after doing something really hard, or maybe it's even watching a scary movie and you feel like this rush afterwards. Great example of this in action is ice baths. 10 dudes got in ice baths at 57 degrees Fahrenheit. Researchers then looked at their dopamine concentrations in their blood plasma and it went up 250%. Norepinephrine went up 530%. And the crazy part is they remained elevated for even hours after they got out of the tubs. So the point here with hormesis is that seeking out hard things, pushing on the pain side of the balance intentionally, will lead to you feeling better and pleasurable. But there's an important nuance Anna Lembke talks about in the book. You can get addicted to pushing on the pain side so that you feel the pleasure. And this happens with like extreme sports and skydivers and daredevils. You see some of them need to push it so far, so extreme, and tragically they die in the process. All right, not to be a buzzkill, let's lighten it up a bit. You might be thinking, well, dude, am I screwed? Like if I'm addicted to this, or my brain is rotted, right? Or I have all these dopamine behaviors, how do we fix this? Dr. Anna Lembke says that recovery begins with abstinence. And she recommends in the book a thing called dopamine fasting, where you take the thing you're hooked on and you abstain from it for a minimum 1 month. Accepted as phone addiction, or it might be as extreme as alcohol or hard drugs. But I've seen people close to me who their whole life were like a 20-year alcoholic. They get help, they stop, and then within 2 years, their whole life is back on track. They're crushing it. Their financial situation's improved. They're getting married. 2 years undoing 20 years of damage. Yeah, I think that's encouraging how fast your brain can rewire. It does take time and it'll feel slow in the short term, but over the long term, you look back, it'll be the best thing you ever did and it'll happen relatively quickly. So I'm putting this in here too, because even if you've tried to quit in the past, don't give up. Don't say like, oh, I'm just never gonna be able to quit this. This is how I am. You just keep getting up, shaking it off, trying again, and then one time it eventually clicks. In the book, she gives an acronym, dopamine, that she gives clients to help them quit. D stands for data. If you're gonna quit anything, you gotta just get honest with where you are. Like, how much are you doing it? When do you use it? What are your triggers? Things like that. O stands for objective. Why do you compulsively go on social media? Is it you're hiding from doing something you know you should be doing? Is it you feel tired? Is it you're rewarding yourself? P stands for problems, okay? These could be physical problems. You know, I mentioned with nicotine, the problems, getting really clear on, dude, this is giving me like health anxiety. I feel like I get nosebleeds from, like, this is not good. Freaking yourself out a bit from the problems this thing is causing you to get some motivation to quit. A stands for abstinence. And I find when you have the previous three, the A is even easier. Like when you have data, an objective, and the problems that it's causing, that motivates you. M stands for mindfulness. So preparing, hey, I'm gonna feel worse before I feel better. I is insight. After 30 days, this is where it becomes clear what it was actually giving you or taking away and how you feel now. N is next steps, and E is experiment. Next steps is what do you want to do after stopping, and experiment is how can you fill this hole that this thing was giving you with other things in the world. Exercising, learning, a new hobby, a new skill, building a business, whatever that is for you. One point I loved in this book is she talks about radical honesty and how this can help overcome bad habits. And there's a study in here that you might have heard of, but there's a follow-up study I found super fascinating, and I want to share it with you here. So, you know the marshmallow study? It's the famous Stanford one where a kid is brought in a room and there's researchers out of the room. They place a marshmallow on the table and they say, hey, if you wait till we come back in the room, we'll give you 2 marshmallows. And then of course the kids who eat the marshmallow and couldn't delay gratification, they followed up with them later. They had worse SAT scores, they had worse social interactions, they were more prone to addictions. But the kids who were able to wait to eat the marshmallow and get the second one, delaying gratification, better willpower, had more success in multiple areas. Well, a research group did a follow-up on that study in 2012 with one twist. The twist is they wanted to see what broken promises did to the kids' ability to wait. And they placed a bell on the table and they said, hey, if you ring this bell, a researcher is gonna come back in and check on you. And group A, when they rang the bell, the researcher came back in and they said, hey, how you doing? You know, everything okay? But group B, the broken promises group, when they rang the bell, no one came in. And what's fascinating about this follow-up, the group that had the promises kept were willing to wait up to 4 times longer than the broken promises group. Dr. Anna Lembke uses that study to illustrate the point of having better social connections, people to lean on, helps you delay gratification and you feel supported with your own network. The other point I think here is that when we feel isolated, like we don't have people around us, that's where we start getting in these shame spirals. And in my experience, when I have really bad habits I can't break, or I get sucked into like, well, what's the point? You know, my own mental issues. It's when I feel like I'm in shame or hiding out in isolation, right? When you're isolated, of course you drink. When you're isolated, of course you go and scroll on. I mean, even do this exercise. Think about every bad habit you have and how many of them you do in isolation versus with other people. Maybe you have a few drinking buddies, okay, whatever. But like 9 out of 10 habits you have that are bad or times that you're low, it's usually in isolation. You're not alone in your loneliness. There's that study floating around, the average American has 1 to 3 close friends. I understand the struggle it is to make friends, but if you can lean on people, your family, any friends you do have, if you don't have a support network and you're trying to break bad habits, seek out a therapist. Even telling the truth to them liberates that shame and stops the spiral that spins you down and causes you to like do bad habits and keep using. I'm putting that in there because I think that's a huge reason we have bad habits in the first place. Is yes, we have chemical imbalances in our brain or dopamine and we try to like level out the scale, but it's also us just feeling lonely and isolated, which causes us to have like this shame, something is fundamentally wrong with me. And if people knew my secrets of what I do in private, then they wouldn't accept me. And I feel shame in this, which, okay, what's the point? And then we just spiral down worse and worse, and it becomes this whole thing. So if you can seek people out, if you can lean on people, if you got people that have your back, that's a great way you can have a support network to help you break free of your bad habits. Hey, if you're still watching, smash the like button. What'd you think of Dopamine Nation? Post your comment down below. Thank you so much for being on this channel. I'll link up right here our previous edition of the book breakdowns if you want to keep this train going. Thanks so much for being here. See you in the next one. Stop settling, start living. Peace.